sometimes as entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever, we don't ask for help. Everybody's always asking us for help, so you get used to being the guy giving help. I learned that lesson hard when I needed it in a family way. When our son he started experiencing challenges, it was hard to actually accept help. Like, people came out of the woodwork, poured out with help, and I struggled with how to actually accept it or handle it, right? It was just weird, because feeling helpless was a real weird feeling. I think you put up these walls, and probably, so the reality is I probably didn't cope with it the way I should have.
Hey guys, Damian Stevens, host of MSP Mindset. Join me today for this raw and unfiltered conversation with Mark Porter. Mark has achieved most of the things that we would call success. He built a business that was adding 3 to 5 new clients every single week, and took it from 14 to 28 million in revenue in 14 months. Took it from losing 2 million to profiting $3 million per year. Took it public. All the things that I know I've looked at as success, but he shares the raw, unfiltered truth of adversity. He had to lay off 30% of his team. He also shared where even at exit events that we all think of wonderful, how some of his team members couldn't let go. They wanted to stay with him. He would have rather they stayed with him. So if you want to learn from his 25 years in business and being one of the top 100 people you should know, according to CRN, don't miss our conversation today. 25 years of running any business is a long friggin' time. I'm like 19 into this one, so I can almost relate. And I know it's easy to get the identity wrapped in there too.
Yeah.
So when did you know it was time to exit?
It's kind of a long story, but in 2019, I had one of these, you've probably seen them, this kind of new, I'm an entrepreneur backed by a PE fund, really smart guy. And it was a real deal, backed with real money. And he seemed like a nice guy. So we started talking. And by November of 2019, I had bought the company back from a public company in 2017, grew it really quickly. It was making a lot of money. I mean, by most people's standards, I think we were making probably $3 million a year or something like that. And it was myself and 2 other shareholders who were minority shareholders. They were awesome shareholders. I'm also not naive enough. I tell people all the time, they were great shareholders. Probably because they got their checks, they got their all their invested capital back, and the business was humming. Right? They might not have been so awesome if I wasn't executing, but the facts were what they were. So we had a relatively easy life. It was fun. It was exciting, but it had still been a long time. I mean, we were going on that. We were at about that 19-year mark, right? And so these guys came. They offered. Their first offer was enough to make it like interesting, and doing what I usually do, I said no without thinking too much about it, just to see what he was going to say. Right. His reaction told me that was not the end of the negotiation, and so we kind of kept meeting and talking and dancing, and they made 2 more offers. And so as we got into December of 2019, the last offer was pretty good, but there was a couple of things that were nagging at me. I mean, we were just beginning this cybersecurity thing, and I was really intrigued by it, and it was actually sort of like reinvigorating, right? Like, it was kind of like something fresh, something new, something exciting. And when I think back about the people that were influencing it and what we were talking about, what we were thinking about versus where we are now, I mean, it was moronic, but it's just so immature-ish and so crazy, honestly, so crazy to think we could do it. And we shouldn't have, honestly. I mean, we just had no business doing it, yet somehow here we are, right? So I didn't want to let go.
Doing which part?
The cyber part. Like I was like, looking back on it, it was crazy. I mean, I had the wrong people, everything was wrong, but they're not here, and we figured it out, right? So it was like the audacity, right? The audacious goal. Only we didn't think it was that audacious. Now in hindsight, it just looks crazy, stupid, foolish, but I really never thought about it that way until as I'm reflecting back on some of those conversations. They were just crazy talk. But in any case, I wanted to keep that part of the business. I really was fascinated about it. And it was almost nothing. It was little more than an idea, but we had some great customers. Everything we did was really around our great partners. And so I knew we could, if we could get something viable, we could sell it. So we just kept kind of plugging away at that. And I kept trying to figure out how to carve that out, or, and it was getting a little complicated. And then I said no again because of that. Honestly, I was just so hyper focused on, I needed the rest of the business to fund it. Because we were making so much money, we could just put the money back into it and avoid taxes on it. So it was a sort of a win-win, right? And a great way to get it off the ground. And then they came back with like one more offer that was really, really good and a way to work together. The problem was when I asked for like their game plan, he said, well, we'll grow 14% a year and blah, blah, blah. And I was still rolling. I would have been, me and my two other shareholders would have been rolling equity as well as holding a note for about 30% of it. And I said, well, I just told you we've grown 42% to over 42% 3 years in a row. And you're laying out this 14% growth pattern. Like, one, how are you going to service the debt? Because we didn't have debt load. We bought it with our own money. I mean, we had debt, but it was to ourselves. So it was a little different thing, right? And I said, two, like, I know we like each other. We've been meeting a lot, and I really do enjoy you. But, like, what kind of guy do you think I am going to be as a shareholder and a note holder if you're growing the company at 14%? When I just told you we've been growing at 40 plus. And he said, I don't know. And I said, I know. I'm going to be a miserable shareholder and debt holder, and I'm going to be putting a boot up your ass all day long, and we're not going to get along. And he's like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I said no again. They're like, no, this isn't going to work. And then that was like a Friday, and Sunday night I woke up. And I said, oh my God, what did I do? What did I walk away from here? And it was the other thing that was nagging at me was really, it ended up being sort of twofold. One, I wouldn't have been able to do enough for some people that I really wanted to do something nice for. And one of them was helping me through the process, and she cried every night, because she knew she would be most likely out of a job. And I could have given her like $500,000, but that didn't seem like enough for the time she had spent with me. And she said, I'm going to have to get a real job. And I said, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. Like, in a way, like, I mean, this is a real job. We employ like 60 people, but she meant it as a compliment. She just meant she loved what she did, and she didn't want to give that up. And She was the only one who knew about it. And even though she cried every night about it when we were talking, she just kept plugging away and helping me and getting me what I needed to make it happen. So that was nagging at me. And then I just felt like I had this unfinished business, and it was really around the cyber business and some other stuff. Now, awesome story and everything. We go into Q1, absolutely blowing it out. Q1 2020, best quarter we ever had. And then, April 1st, the world shut down. So we went from the best quarter we ever had to the end of March being really weird because this rumblings were all going on about all this crazy stuff, to being told we couldn't leave our house in Illinois for the next 2 weeks and having a meeting. And I'll never forget that meeting, looking around. There was 5 of us in the room. And I said, how many days of cash do we have if nobody pays us a penny of what they owe us? Because that's what I thought was going to happen. I assumed all of our customers were going to sit on their cash. And some did because they were having the same meetings. And then the answer, by the way, was, I think, 35 days.
It's better than most.
It was yes, much better than most. That was assuming zero payment. Assuming 50% payments, we were probably okay out to I think 80 days. But we didn't even have a line of credit because myself and the 2 other owners said, if we needed money, we'd put in money or whatever. But we didn't have a bank line or anything like that. So we were faced with Armageddon and uncertainty. And in that meeting, there was, we talked about what do we do. I remember that. There was some good answers. There was a couple completely insane ones. So
everybody remembers that time. Yeah.
That individual was at the top of the list when we started making lists. So I told my COO at the time to start making lists of, this is bad, this is really bad, and holy shit. And I wanted those 3 lists. And he made those 3 lists. I had to go to New York for a meeting. And I went to New York. And this was the end of March as we were kind of preparing for this. And it was pretty clear the way things were going. But so I got to LaGuardia. Things were kind of weird in New York. I was down in Manhattan and very empty. I had lunch the next day in Times Square, and there was 10 people in Times Square.
Wow.
Really the end of the world. I mean, it was so surreal. So I told the guys that I was meeting with that I had to leave at 4 for my flight. I left at 4:30 for LaGuardia thinking I was going to miss my 7 p.m. flight. That's not enough time. No way I'm going to get there. And I got to LaGuardia 22 minutes later. And I was like, there's nobody in line. I mean, I walked right through security, walked into the Admiral's Lounge, and there were more employees than passengers. Got on my plane, and I was sitting in first, and I was talking to one of my shareholders, so I wasn't really paying attention to the boarding process. We took off, had a couple drinks. It's only an hour and 20-minute flight or whatever, get home to Chicago. I get home, I stand up, and I grab my bag from my rollerboard from above, and I looked behind me, and there was nobody on the plane. There was, I think, 7 people on that flight. And 4 of us were in first, and there was 2 people, 3 people just in the row behind the bulkhead. And I called my COO, and that time he was in Eastern time zone. It was probably 10 o'clock his time. I called him and I said, go to the oh shit list and start tomorrow. He said, no, you're overreacting. I said, no. I said, we got to do this. There's going to be a flood of people going. This is the most humane thing we can do is get them into unemployment, whatever. And it ended up being so we started making really big cuts. We cut like 30% of our staff. And it ended up being, in some ways, the best thing we did for those people, because they got in the system ahead of other people, like by days, because days after this, everybody was doing the same. And it was just crazy. And it was just such an extreme, from coasting almost to how we going to make it. There was no PPP or anything even proposed yet, right? So fortunately, that was huge for us. It was a big win for us. It kept a lot of people employed, which I think is like the most important thing you can do for people, is give them a sense of purpose. So all that said, I mean, that whole saga, fast forward to maybe mid-April when we had a board meeting and it ended. We all agreed that by late August, this thing was going to have run its course and everything would be back to normal. So they're like, okay, so everybody will be over it in August. September, things will start normalizing. And by fourth quarter, everything will be fine. None of us really thought through the election year thing or any of the political stuff that was going on around it. Never crossed our minds. And that call ended. So we agreed, like, okay, we're going to be fine till then. We've made all the adjustments. PPP was coming. We're going to be okay. And that meeting ended with one of the other guys saying, I only hope we don't get to September and look back and say, God, how naive were we in April, and that this thing's going to just keep dragging out. And I said, no way. It's no way. So It ended, and sure as shit, like September comes and we're like looking at each other like, when is it going to end? I mean, there was no end in sight. And then all of a sudden the supply chain delays were starting, like you couldn't get a car. Remember, like the cars disappeared, and we dealt in everything we dealt in has a microprocessor in it, not just the cheap ones, right? It's all the high end ones. So that whole saga, when you laid it out from all that and went all the way through the next 2.5, 3 years of COVID, it just was time. So for me, there was all sorts of personal stuff that happened in that time with you don't know what you got till it's gone. And I had a kid who lost his health. And you want to talk about precious, you take for granted when you're just healthy your whole life. And then all of a sudden your kid's not. And that's worse than losing your own health, I think. But most helpless. Really. So all of that over the same period of time. So for me, when this opportunity came and the cyber business is in the place where it really needs the time and attention, and we've accomplished a scale that we needed to get to, where it's time to just hit the gas, it just was time. And I'm still involved with it, and I still get the pleasure of helping. And honestly, it's mostly from, I want to make sure the guys that bought it hit a home run, and the people that went with it are set up for success. And not everybody went with it, and that sucked. That really sucked. I know there will be people that probably, harbor ill will, and I don't blame them, because it's never easy, especially when it's not their fault. They're just sometimes in these sorts of deals, it's a much larger thing. Sometimes in these sorts of deals, it does come down to numbers, and it's hard to boil people down to a payroll number, but that's.
Hey guys, today's episode is sponsored by Servosity. I created Servosity because I was an MSP that lost data. Then I had to go in front of my client and tell them I can't recover. If you've ever been there or worried that you would be there, then you may want to take a look at Servosity. We do two things that nobody else is crazy enough to do. We test your backups maniacally. We do that daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly for you Then we manage the backups for you so you can focus on growing your MSP instead of babysitting backups. If you're interested in our unlimited storage or immutable storage or any of the things that I'm talking about, visit Serbosity.com. I want to back up a little bit, kind of during that COVID era. When we were talking before, you were talking about how people were upset and not for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I've been through that a couple times, 2008, and then in the transition in this sale and that COVID thing, I got a couple of really incredible emails from employees, some of it hadn't even been here that long. And I think that was the part that took me off guard mostly. It makes you realize sometimes you're just doing your job and you're just doing what you do and treating people generally right. I mean, I'm far from perfect, trust me, but I do believe if you do things for the right reasons, it comes back to you tenfold. Even if you get screwed somewhere down the line, it's going to come back to you and maybe not material things, maybe things that make you just feel great, right? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that makes you feel not so great. So I got a lot of notes, and I mean, probably the most gracious thing anyone ever did for me, and he took it the hardest. If he ever sees this, he'll probably kill me for telling anybody this story. But in 2008, when the world was falling apart, I had my 3 largest customers go bankrupt in 90 days. I didn't know what the hell we were going to do. Yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, we were apparently 24 hours from ATMs not having money in them and all that stuff, right? The system was illiquid. And when that happened, and Nortel was our biggest customer, and they owed us $687,327, and they went bankrupt, and I didn't know how we were going to deal with it. And they funded one of my employees. They actually paid his base salary, and he called me that morning and said, "I know that you can't afford me anymore, but I'm not leaving. So you tell me whatever number it is that you can pay me, and I'll stay. We'll figure it out." And he hadn't been here that long. He had been like 2 years. And he was a good dude. He still is a great dude. And Paul, if you see this, I love you. He's my member guest partner every year at my club. He's an amazing golfer. Same guy again. My member guest was the week after I sold that business, and he went with it. And it was one of the hardest conversations because I had to keep him out of it till the very end. It was only about 4 people who knew the whole thing was happening. And I talked to him on a Friday, and I said, "Listen, I got to share some things with you. And it's not going to be an easy conversation." And we talked through it. And he didn't say much, almost nothing, in fact. And I said, "You all right?" He said, "Yeah, fine." And we hung up. And my wife was sitting next to me, heard most of it, knew who I was talking to, and knew the relationship we had. And she said, "How'd he take it?" I said, "He was fine." I said, "He didn't bat an eye. He didn't see him." I said, "I sort of think maybe he doesn't love me anymore." she said, "What?" I said, "He was totally unaffected." So went about the weekend, and Monday morning, he called me, and I thought he was calling to talk about the logistics of flying up on Wednesday for the tournament. And he called, and he said, "I just want to make sure I understood what you told me correctly on Friday." And he read it back to me, and he said, "So I don't work for you anymore, right?" I said, "No, not really." And he said, "I'm still doing the same thing, but for somebody else, right? I said, yep. He said, damn it, that's what I thought. He said, it hit me on Sunday night, what you said. I said, I laid this all out on Friday and you didn't react at all. He said, I did on Sunday. He said, I sat on my couch and cried. He said, my wife, his fiance, brought him a drink and he just sat there on his couch and cried. He said, it just took a little while for it to sink in. He said, I don't know if I wanted to be in denial or not. I got some other really nice letters, and one employee's husband called me. He was very upset. He said, does this mean we can't be friends anymore? And he was joking, of course, but you form, it's interesting. I think some of my other executive team will tell you the thing that they're always fascinated about is when they talk to other employees, they would talk about their relationship, the unique relationship that they had with me. And the only thing I could say is I always felt like with each of them it was unique, right? As long as you're genuine, and I think those who know, there's some, they sort of know. Generally, people know where they stand with me because I'm either at ease with you or I'm not. And if I'm not, it's usually because I don't like nervous energy very much, but it makes me on guard a little bit. But I've had the good fortune of working with so many people, and there was 2 people that commented on LinkedIn that were just like never employees, but partners, or worked at Cisco, worked at Nortel, whatever, and commented about how satisfying it must be to have seen it off and to end it with it was a pretty good financial success for our shareholders, but the satisfying and the hardest part all at the same time was we employed so many people over the years that came through. I mean, at the peak when we had the staffing business and everything else, we had close to 400 people, some of whom I never met. I mean, that was the weirdest part. You get that, you get when you get that big. I mean, you got guys and gals out in the field that you never meet, and you're responsible for them, and some of them in dangerous jobs, climbing poles and doing electrical work and stuff like that. But I hated not knowing them all. But when you think about even just at a steady state of 60 or 80 people, and the sort of churn that happens over the years and over 25 years, I mean, I wish I knew the number, but it's got to be 600-700 people that came and went over time. So you realize that you have an opportunity to really influence people's lives, and I wish I thought about that a lot more when I was younger, in my 30s. And I was probably a lot more self-absorbed and trying to build my kingdom. You're so focused on the business that it's easy to forget how much impact you have on people's lives. And I look at some of these young kids that started with us back in the days when all we did was Nortel stuff. We had a group of these young maniacs that would just fly around the country, and they were wild, man. I mean, they were, and the coolest part was I would get to go out on sites with them sometimes, meet them out at job sites or whatever, just hang out with them. And, they were 19, 20, 21 years old. Couldn't get them cars, couldn't rent them cars because they were too young, all that stuff. And what's mind-blowing is now I look at some of these guys are running businesses at places like Cisco or Axis, the camera guys. I mean, they've gone on to some amazing careers, and it's like to think that you had a little part in that is kind of cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If there was some way to, it's easy to keep score on revenue or profit or EBITDA, but impact.
Yeah. I guess that's the point, right? Is you don't keep score. If you're keeping score, like people who keep score, who could tell you like exactly what that number is or whatever, it's usually for themselves. Like, and if you're truly keeping score that way, then I don't know that you can have that kind of impact, right? Because then you're also trying to figure out like what they're doing for you. And I worked for this crazy guy for a while, and he used to say, look, if I got to put the whole lot of you on my back and drag you, I'll do it. But if I catch you dragging your damn foot in the sand, off you go, right? And I think that's got to be the mentality, right? He's like, let's go do this, and I'll carry you, you carry me. Like whoever's got to carry it today, do it, but just don't hold us back, right? And if you but if you're keeping score on like the personal stuff, I don't know that I know that's one thing my wife and I talk about is we keep score too much in our marriage, right? It's not a healthy habit, right? We're always trying to forget what the score is because that's not the secret to longevity. I've been fortunate to be married all this time. She's been through this whole damn crazy ride. So
it's amazing.
That's a whole chapter in a book unto itself. Is the only thing worse than being an entrepreneur is being the wife of an entrepreneur.
Being married to one, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm sure my wife would chime in right now if she was here on that. 100%.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
I'll never the first question when I said we were buying the company. She said, "Well, what happens if there's not enough money for a check?" I said, "Well, then we won't get one."
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Yeah. I thought it was self-evident. She didn't like the answer anymore. She doesn't like that answer anymore today either. So, and it still happens from time to time, man. When things are lean and you're asking people to cut. That was another time. I got a lot of letters, and none of them bad. When I said, "Look, we gotta tighten our belts here. This ain't working, and we got to make some changes." And I was fortunate that my COO and my CFO and myself went to zero pay. For various lengths of time. For two of us, we went 2.5 months before Christmas. Not really like the best time of year to tell your wife that, we're going to go lean for a while, but, you can't ask everybody else to take even a little bit of a haircut if you're not willing to eat your own dog food, so to speak. So, when you do it, I think that's the most amazing part. And for anybody who's out there who hasn't been there, I hope you never are, but just about every great story I've ever seen has one or two chapters where they were looking into the abyss, because you really start to figure out who you are. I can't remember that great line from Wall Street, but something about when man looks into the abyss. And that is really when you find out who you are, and you find out who your friends are, and you find out who's with you. So as long as you do the right thing, and even better if you do the right thing times 10, other people jump in with you.
Yeah. I want to kind of frame it this way. How did you go from, at one point you took the business from 14 to 28 million in revenue, and you went from losing to having a $3 million profit, right? So that's the times where it seems like you can't do any wrong. And if I understand you, at one point, I'm probably conflating these, maybe 400 employees, adding like 3 to 5 clients a week. A lot of people add that in a year. And then, whether it's 2008, whether it's COVID, whether it's just life and business, how did you manage the roller coaster, the mental roller coaster?
Man, that implies that's a loaded question. Went to law school for a little while. The implication in that question, be that on my conscience, dropped out of that real fast. The implication in that question is that I did manage the emotional roller coaster. I guess if Tito's and food are managing it, I did a great job at times. But I would have. Everybody should have been buying Tito's stock. I joined a lot of other people during the pandemic and indulging too much, probably. But at that time, there were roughly 6 businesses under the holding company when we reverse merged into this public entity, which found myself in a situation I'd never been in before. And ultimately, that I'm to blame for it. There's a whole bunch of factors, but
I can relate to that.
it's just easier to just, own it and say, overestimated my own capabilities, overestimated capabilities of those around me, trusted some people I shouldn't have trusted, all of those things, which all falls on me. So I think they're common mistakes. It doesn't excuse them. We all make them. And it would have been easy to just say at that point, woe is me. Because again, this is all in the midst of COVID. So now that deal closed in June of 21. We were working on it. That's why I was in New York, actually. And then I backed out, just walked away from it for a little while, and then it came back around. And in early 21, we had consummated the deal. We were just waiting for some regulatory things to happen for us to close the deal. So I had like 6 businesses working under that umbrella. I had pretty good management team. Couple, in hindsight, a couple folks I think could have been better. What we had to do, if you were looking at it, so we got some PPP funds, so it had a bit of a cushion, but it was still this indefinite, like, when is this going to end? Because the commonality amongst almost all of those businesses, with the exception of the cyber, was that it required people to go on site and install things in offices, right? Like, now, I mean, fast forward 20 years, somebody's seeing this, they're going to be like, what the hell's an office, right? I mean, at that time, there's nobody going to offices. So, and then you couldn't get hardware. There was no equipment. So it was like, what in the name of God is next? And stuff that I had never had to deal with before at this magnitude, right? I mean, it was not unheard of to have a shortage of access points for a job, sure, but it was unheard of to have an 18-month lead time on access points for a job. And so we had to start looking at supply chains differently and starting to figure things out, staffing differently. So what we did was we focused on what businesses could benefit from these circumstances. And the staffing business was the one that could benefit because it's counter-cyclical. And as other people were trying to get lean and get rid of full-time and augment, the staffing business could benefit. So we started finding new things that we could staff into because we had the tools and everything for it. And then we found new customers in existing verticals. And then we found, because of the nature of the customers we were selling into, they were huge telecom companies, huge service providers, new contacts within there, and went after a few different segments of business in new territories. And then we fixed the math. And then we worked on the pricing, because we could see costs were inflating very quickly. Like things were getting weird. And so we got very focused on the numbers. So that business exploded relatively quickly and was carrying the day and keeping us muddling along. The problem that we had in that entirety of the ecosystem that made life miserable, cost of capital was, in 12 months, cost of capital quadrupled. Like, yeah. In no time in my lifetime, my adult lifetime, has that ever happened, right? The last time something like that happened was the 70s. And seeing debt in the teens was like, what the hell? I mean, debt was 2%, so all of a sudden things went haywire. So we just got laser focused on that business, but we had a cap table that was so screwed up. And to some degree or another, I think not everybody was candid about how friendly all the players were. There were things that were said and assurances that were made that weren't followed through on and things like that. But mostly at the end of the day, again, I accepted the responsibility, and I really should have understood a few things better, and not just people's intent, right? And so some of these debt instruments were really, really horrifically toxic. With I think I had 5 cross-collateralized pieces of debt that I inherited.
Wow.
Which, yeah, I mean, oh my God, what a mess that was. And a lot of it was convertible. And what I didn't truly understand is they didn't actually want to be paid. They wanted to trade it out. That was the game. And they would make 5 or 10 times more money trading it out. And then I was so naive, I didn't understand we needed investment bankers to raise a pipe. Turns out we didn't. We went out and I cold called shareholders, and I literally started cold calling, finding them on Facebook, finding contact information for people who had, for some reason or another, been buying large amounts of shares in this company even before we reverse merged into it, and convincing them to invest in a different way. And then we paid those people off, and we made some significant steps forward. And we sold that staffing business, which got rid of most of the rest of that toxic stuff. And but the cost of, for us, the challenge throughout all of this was the cost of capital was still ridiculously high. The cost of being a micro cap is in the public space is ridiculous. It's in the millions annually, 1.5 to 1.7 million. It's crazy stuff, and you can't run even a $20 million business. At that time, with all the businesses together at the peak of that staffing business, we did 55 million collectively in 58 million collectively in 22. In 23, we would have done 85 million roughly. So it was, we were growing them, we were doing all the right things, but the cost of capital was consuming the profits, and then what wasn't being consumed was the cost of being public. So it just was not, there really wasn't a way out but to grow, right? Like you couldn't cut your way out of it. You couldn't do any other thing. So when it came down to how do you do it or what do you do, it's what can we sell to our customers? What do our partners need? What can we do for them that we're not doing now with modest investment? Because all the while, here we've got this cyber business that's growing like 100% year over year. It's not profitable, and it's not going to be profitable for another couple of years. Not today, but as you're going through this, like it's not going to be profitable for a long time because we're building it very specifically for a purpose. So how do I, keep investing in that, keep going, or do you cut it off? Like several times, a couple of people said, drop it. And I said, that is the future of the business. That thing is worth more than all of the other things combined if we get to break even. And God forbid, profitability, right? You start talking about multiples. So, we just believed in that so much that we were willing to keep doing whatever we had to do. We just kept focusing on how to manage through sometimes the day, sometimes the week, sometimes the month, depending on the situation, and keep selling, right? Never stop selling and never stop delivering for the customer. And in doing all that, we got to this place. Now, personally, it took a huge toll on me. Because you hit on it. It's a long time to do it, generally speaking, but then just grinding through the last few years and the constant state of stress of I got to make payroll, got to get whatever wolf at the door needs cash today to keep the lights on. Got to believe in this thing enough to keep investing in this thing that I know is going to be losing money for a long time. Got to get, still got a wife, kids, one having real serious issues, the other not getting enough attention because her brother's having serious issues, and,
right.
And all that puts a strain on your relationships and takes away from your focus and takes away from your energy and all those things. So I don't know exactly how, I know at some, actually, when I turned 50 and my wife told me I was way too fat, she took me away. She took me out of the country to the Caribbean for my birthday. And we got there and I thought we were going to have to come back that night. I was looking at flights to come back because I didn't think we were going to make it through the weekend, the company. And I was trying to figure out how to break that to her because I knew she put a lot of time and energy into it. But we did. We made it through that weekend, and MICO did an amazing job, pulled some stuff off. And my wife gave me a bit of a wake-up call about my health, and I'm like, I'll show her. And so got back on the health train and all that. And all I can say is, again, in the last 2 months, it's like when you start to look back, I was walking and having an imaginary talk with one of my mentors who's passed, thinking back on some crazy stuff and laughing, literally walking down the street laughing. Probably people thought I was crazy. But it was good stuff, and I knew he was there with me. But when, just looking back now with 60 days or so to reflect, a lot of things I wish I'd done better. The coping business wise, I think he's there. But there's a guy. I should have really heeded Jeff's advice. Friend of mine, Jeff, who's about the quirkiest bitch you ever want to meet. Quirky to the tune of tens of millions of dollars of wealth and success from software businesses and stuff. But he is very upfront about his battles with depression and mental health issues and things like that. And he talks to other entrepreneurs and he's talked to me about it. I didn't realize he was seeing things I probably wasn't, which is why he was doing it. We sometimes as entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever, we don't ask for help, right? Like we don't.
Yeah.
Everybody's always asking us for help, so you get used to being the guy giving help. The hardest thing, I learned that lesson hard when I needed it in a family way. When our son was first started experiencing challenges, it was hard to actually accept help. Like people came out of the woodwork that they'd heard about it. I don't even know how they heard, most of them. And they like poured out with help. And I struggled with how to actually accept it or handle it, right? It was just weird because feeling helpless was a real weird feeling. I think you put up these walls and probably, so the reality is I probably didn't cope with it the way I should have. And I probably should have listened to my friend Jeff, and I probably should have taken my own advice that sometimes the voices you need to hear most are the ones that you don't want to listen to. So.
Yeah, well said. I think if you've been in a business for more than a minute, you're gonna have your own battles. You're gonna get knocked down,
Yeah, for sure.
I just love that you're sharing so openly. Whether it's your son, whether it's your marriage, whether it's all the business, and I think there's so many people that it's easy to put it on a pedestal. Like I can go like, hey, let's see, CRN top 500, MSSP top 50. Like there's all these awards and accolades, and I'm not taking any of them away. But there's so many people I think that go, that's the life I want. And I don't know about you, but in the middle of it, I'm often like, I'll trade with you. Like that whole steady paycheck thing and not dealing with so many people where you feel like, I don't know about you, but I felt like I had to have the answer. I felt this pressure where I was supposed to know.
You always feel like, I think that's a trap, and that's something else that my friend Jeff always talked about. As I got a little older and maybe a little slower, I guess, I like to think I could try to fool myself into thinking that I'm as quick-witted and light on my feet as I was 20 years ago, but I'm not. And I need time. And I got away from, as I got into my mid-40s and got the business set up in a way where it functioned better without me, because I always overestimated my importance to it when I was younger. And I had another good friend who always used to say, "You're just not that important, dude." And And he meant it in the nicest way, right? It's just a reminder, like, and so when I had the businesses functioning well, and you had the right teams in place, and all I had to worry about was we use this EOS system, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It was the best thing. In 2017, I stumbled into that. It was the best thing that ever happened to us. We got away from it. I mean, we were kind of using it, but not really practicing it, right? During COVID, and that was because everything was a constant crisis. But as we got that functioning, I started to understand how important time away was. And for me, and this, some people think this is weird, but at first I don't think that anyone, including my wife, understood it the way I needed it. But I started going to, we had bought the house in Key West in 2014 or 15, something like that. And then when I bought the company back in 2017, like every 90 days or so, I would go down there and take customers, or if we were going to do an acquisition or a key hire, I always took them down there because they can't hide whatever weirdness they have within them for more than a day or two down there. Eventually it'll come out. And I just wanted to know who they were, right? Like I really wanted to know if it was an important decision who they were. But I would go down there and spend a day by myself, because the coolest part about that place is everybody's crazy and it's just weird and nuts and whatever. So it doesn't matter who you are. There's lots of really, really wealthy people down there, and there's lots of really, really poor people. And I pretty much defy you to tell the difference, other than maybe, whether or not they've showered recently, which, in that kind of general heat, you could tell. So, but I would go down there and just like kind of be by myself for a day or so. And I liked being by the ocean. I liked just not having to be anybody and not have to answer anybody's questions or whatever. And then if you don't take that time for yourself, if you're not caring for yourself, I will tell you the last few years, I was not the best version of myself because I was not doing the things that I knew made me good. And by not doing that for me, I probably was not doing the best service to others that I could have. And I've already seen in the last 60 days how much better I am, how much more effective I am, and how much I can accomplish in half the time because I'm taking the time and being unapologetic about it to golf in the morning or to do it when I want to do it and set my schedule back to blocks of time that work for me. And when the block is over, I'm done. Like I'm not doing that thing anymore, even if it's not complete. I'll deal with it. And most of what I have to work on doesn't have to be done by like this minute, right? So, and that's by design because we're back to we've got the right teams, and the places where we're not right will be right literally next Monday. So, which is a huge, like I'm going to be like the happiest guy on earth because I've got the best people in the world to work with on Monday, and good people and awesome at what they do, and bolstered a couple of weak spots. And I'm replacing myself. I fired myself basically in a day-to-day role, and I get to go work with customers, and that's the coolest part of the job.
That's awesome. That's like your zone of genius here.
It's my fastball, right? Like one of my shareholders asked me, "What's your fastball?" And so I like to do deals. And he said, "I can hire operators all day long. We can find the best operators we want. You just got to pay them." And he said, he said it's hard to find. It's hard to find people who can go out. And I get to talk to the employees more too, which is awesome because they know I don't do the hiring and firing. When you fall back to in EOS parlance, you fall back to the visionary role and not the integrator. You don't hire and fire anybody. And guess what? They talk to you. They talk real. Like you don't have to be their boss, right? They respect you. They know like you're still like the CEO or whatever, but you get to be like the chief people guy too. And then you can truly have meaningful conversations with them and figure out what's wrong. And oftentimes when you talk to them about the personal stuff, that's when you find out what's really bugging them at work and what the real issue is, as opposed to like, they always point to that one thing, and that thing is always like, well, I can fix that thing, but then it'll be like another thing. And it's usually like something more in the dynamics of the team. And you start to figure out if the team's dysfunctional, man, those little things don't matter.
I want to go to the people part for a moment, which is, I love what you talked about Key West. Like, you bring everybody down there and everybody's crazy. And I also love the part where you said, after a couple of days, spend some time yourself, just by yourself, but also after a couple of days, like, they come out, you get to know them. And I love that you're doing that with any key hire. But I feel like there's this huge part of you that just loves coaching people, loves helping people, seeing them thrive and succeed. So tell me, like, everything you told me was, sure, it was your story, but I feel like most of it was colored through how do I take care of my team? And I can relate to that so much. So what drives you to do that, Mark? Why?
I don't spend a lot of time. I'm trying to learn to ask why in a different context, but it's interesting you asked me that, because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about why I want to do that as much as when I'm thinking about why now. Like, I want to know the why for other people. Like, why do you want to do this? Why, that part. And now when I'm thinking about why, I think about it more in terms of, I read this book called The Untethered Soul that somebody suggested for me. And it's interesting. It says, why am I reacting to this thing or this action? I spend a lot of time about that. But as far as why I enjoy seeing people succeed, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about why. I just feel like I always played sports maybe, and it's just maybe something intrinsic, something, it makes me happy. Like, we had this kid, and man, you like, so many awesome experiences coaching kids. We had this kid, Sam, and he nicknamed himself Slammin' Sammy. And I still see the kid around town, and my son sees him once in a while. He was awful. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There was something not exactly right about him physically, but damn that kid. Every time he went up to bat, he would tell me, this is the one. I'm going to hit it this time. He was scared of the ball. I mean, to the point where I've trained dogs to be bird dogs, which is really not really training. You're just training them to respond to you because you're just taking what they know for thousands of years bred into them, right? Mm-hmm. So part of it's like teaching them not to be afraid of stuff, like not to be afraid of gunfire and things like that, not to be afraid of you and different things. So I thought, well, how do I get Sammy not to be afraid of the ball? So it was kind of cold. I live in Chicago. And so it's springtime baseball in Chicago, you might be playing in the snow sometimes. It's crazy. So you got this 8-year-old kid who has this puffy winter jacket on, and he's a scrawny kid. I said, Sammy, put your jacket back on. We're going to go out in the outfield. And I said to his dad, I said, is it okay if I do something a little unorthodox with Sam? And he looks at me kind of weird and says, sure, fine, whatever. So I took him out there and made him stand like he was going to take batting practice. And I kept hitting him with the ball. Not hard, just soft, like just to show him with that padded coat, like it wasn't going to kill him, right? And so that didn't work. But all season, Sammy, I tried. All I wanted was Sammy to get a hit. And I wanted it so bad that like Sammy had to get a hit. Well, he didn't. And but our greatest moment in that season, the highlight of the year was in the playoffs Again, they're like 8 years old, right? I mean, they're half goofy. You know, my kid was out eating dandelions and doing weird stuff in the outfield because baseball really wasn't his thing. I'm not even sure he was actually my son because he couldn't hit a baseball. So he hated hitting. I'm like, this is the best part of the game, man. He's a great outfielder. If he sees this, he'll kill me for saying that. But, the greatest moment of that season was in the playoffs. My son had the lead off, and he was an awful hitter. And then there was another kid who never got a hit, and then Slammin' Sammy. And we were down 3 runs in the bottom of the last inning with those 3 as our first 3 batters. And the kid heaving was my son's best friend who was really bringing it. And he was going to be their closer. And I said to my son, I said, son, you're the leadoff hitter this inning. You know what that means, right? He said, leadoff hitter's got to get on base. I said, yep. I said, you got to get on base, son. He goes, at any cost, right, Dad? I said, got to get on base, son. Leadoff hitter's got to get on base. Knew there was no chance in hell he was going to get a hit. First pitch, he leans out over the plate, takes one in the rib cage, giant thud. Everybody holds their breath. He sprints to first as happy as could be because he was getting on. As fate would have it, the next kid gets beamed. His name was Trey. This is how much I love seeing these kids succeed. Trey gets beamed. That pitcher has to come out of the game because at that age, if you hit 2 kids, you're considered wild and you got to bring in a new pitcher. They bring in this other kid who was awful, could barely throw the ball. He was the only kid they had left. And he hits Slammin' Sammy. So Slammin' Sammy sprints to first base. We've now got bases loaded with the 3 worst hitters that have ever played baseball. and we got a chance. And Sammy is standing over there on first. He represented, I think, the winning run. And he's standing over there like he just won the Super Bowl. I mean, he is going to Disney. And the next kid up, Aldo, drills the ball to the fence. Those 3 score. Pandemonium. We lost the next game, got our butts kicked because we weren't that good. But for that moment, those 3 kids were the hero of that game. And it was awesome. And then the next year, Sammy was on a different team. And I was the assistant coach. I was coaching first base, and he dropped a blooper over the first baseman's head and got the first hit of his lifetime. He ran through first, was running around all over the field because he was so excited. I didn't have the heart to yell at our kids to tag him out. And our head coach said, he has to get his first hit against us. I said, Luke, God damn it, man. Like, be happy for this kid. Yeah. We worked so hard. Like, we had a part in this. Like, you didn't get it with us, but, you know, we had a hand in it. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. I mean, how many people along the way taught you how to do something and were excited when you did it, and how good did that make you feel that it made them feel good, right? Like, it's awesome to see people succeed. And I've pulled people from crazy walks of life into this and watched them just kick ass. And they'll run through a brick wall for you on top of it when they start realizing they're good, right? Like, and they start having this sense of worth. And then, you know, sadly, sometimes they leave because you don't have anything better for them, and they go on to something better. And it's sad, but it's like part of the deal. My very good friend came here for 2 years, and the plan was, look, you'll either move up or you go get a better job somewhere else. And he was in a profession. He was a finance guy, and he did. He got a job that paid him like $50,000 more. I couldn't offer him that, and he wasn't right, and he didn't have the public background to take the other stuff. So I was bummed, but like, he's thriving. So that's good to see. And if you had any part in that, like, you know, I think too often we just get wrapped around like, oh, they lost me. And, you know, I did all this for them. And again, that goes to that scorekeeping thing, right? Like, that's it. And then, look, I'm not perfect. There's times where I'm like, damn. I mean, I've had salespeople where I felt like I poured myself into them. And then the minute things were a little rocky and I needed just a little concession. You know, I had one who exploited an error, literally an error on a comp plan. That was a $30,000 mistake because of something somebody typed. And I said, you're right, it's in black and white. I'll give you that money. I'll pay you that money tomorrow if you want it, but you know that you didn't accomplish the goal. You know that's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the money, it does change the dynamic of our relationship. You understand that. And that person said, yes, I want the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. And our relationship changed forever, right? Like that, because you feel like you've poured something into them. That person was making 3 times what the best they ever did before. 3 times. And I said it would take us 2 years to get them there, 3 years to get us there. And we did it in half the time. Like, in hindsight, I got wrapped up in it because of whatever, my ego or whatever. Like, it's really, my mentor told me that I should feel pity for those people. And he's right. It takes a little time to step away and think about it. But you really should feel pity for them because they traded the one thing that no amount of money in the world is worth trading. That was my loyalty, right? I was loyal because conversely, if that person hadn't been making quota for a year after having 2 or 3 great years or whatever, I wouldn't have fired him either, right? Like say, okay, it's a down cycle. Like we'll get it back. We'll go get him next year, right? And it can't go on forever, but went somewhere else and guess what? Didn't make the numbers and got fired. It was a short term. There's been 3 other places since, right? So, Harold was right. Like that, you should, feel sorry for people who don't see the long game the same way or understand the value of the personal relationships that go along with it.
I couldn't agree with that more, Mark. There's a couple of questions for you. We've covered so much. What in your career? What's the biggest lesson?
Man, it's a lot of them. Get it in writing. Think. Understand your strengths and weaknesses, and there's good advice out there in a lot of places, and even places you don't think about. Like the best advice I got was from my dad, who will tell you that I probably never listened to a word he said. He likes to say that. It's mostly true, but every once in a while I was paying attention. My dad was a cop for just shy of 30 years. And the day before I left for the police academy, he told me something about police work that I think is probably the best advice I ever actually got in business. And he asked me to do 2 things. The first one was never to lie about something because you only can do that once. And there's real consequences in that business to lying. And, there's pressure to do it at times. So he said, don't do it. And I said, okay. And he said, the second one, he said, you're going to say, okay, you're going to think this is easy, but it's really hard. He said, never forget that you're dealing with human beings. And in everything you do, there's still people. So never take away a human being's dignity. And I said, yeah, okay. I mean, seems easy enough. It's not. It's really hard. Like when they bite you or spit at you or try to grab for your gun, or one tried to stab me in the neck with a pen. Like it's easy to take that personally and to completely lose. It's easy to completely lose your mind. It's hard to stop. In fact, you rely on having good partners who know when you've flipped a switch, right? And they need to reel you back in. But I can honestly say that I'm so fortunate because there's only like 2 times I ever think I actually let him down and screwed that up. And both of those times, years later, ended up where those people found me through somebody that they had contact with, or my former partner in one case, or another cop that they sought out, and a third time actually, so the guy found me on Facebook, and that moment where I might have lost it on them ended up being a turning point for them in 2 cases of addiction with drugs and alcohol, and one in a bad relationship where they ended up that was their rock bottom moment. And so what was a bad moment for me because I felt bad that I'd broken my commitment and that I'd done something I shouldn't have done. Wasn't illegal. It was just like treating people badly you shouldn't feel good about, right?
Right.
No matter what. And there were ugly circumstances. It was like you're dealing with people in ugly situations. But those turned out to be, I got redemption out of it. And I love a good story about redemption. And then, I've really thought about that a lot at work because it's easy to be wrapped up in mistakes or think the world's coming to an end. But I guess if I could, like, when you think it's that bad, like, and when I think it's that bad, I always reflect back on a conversation I had with a really bad boss, whose name I won't say. When I got into telecom, he was a terrible boss. He always stole my ideas. I hated that. But he said to me one time, he said, "I don't understand." And I said, "What?" He said, you've got two peers in my region, and I can't get either one of them to make a damn decision to save their life. But you make a decision, good or bad, and you live with it. And if it's bad, you just keep moving on and keep adjusting." He said, "But you don't think twice about it. You don't fret over it all day. You don't like wait a week or hope I won't circle back with you on it." He said, "Why?" And I said, "Why is it easy to make a decision?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Because nobody's going to die today." And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, what the hell does that mean?" And I said, "No matter what we do here, nobody's going to die. Like, maybe we lose a little money or somebody quits or we get fired by a customer or whatever. None of those are great things, but like, I worked in a job where if you made a mistake, you could kill somebody. If you made a mistake, you could get killed. Like, that's not ideal." So it was a different frame of reference. And sometimes I have to remind myself, like, nobody's going to die today. We just unfuck it. Sorry to be crass, and move on, right? Like, if you don't fly from point A to point Z, you go like all zigzagging all over, constant course correcting, and you got to be okay with that. Like, you just have to be okay with that. And sometimes it's a U-turn, right? Like, shit, screwed up, own it. And I will tell you, our best customer relationships, my best partner relationships have all come from them wanting to fire us, like, and how you handle it. So that's nobody awesome. Dies. You move on. And by the way, if they can't accept that you're making mistakes, and if you respond to it the right way, and if you do all the right things, it shouldn't be your customer anyways.
What's the one thing you would do over if you had the opportunity?
I would have. It's funny because I asked people. I was doing a podcast for a while. Got the time to get back to it now. But I asked, what's the one thing, the one question I ask everybody, the only scripted question is what would you tell a 20-year younger version of you? And I think that comes from the one thing that I would do over again is I would have figured out my priorities better when I was younger. I wish I could have figured out my priorities better when I was younger. I don't know. I think with age comes perspective, hopefully. Right. I like to think I'm getting a little better. Might not be I might have lost a little off my fastball, but I think my accuracy is probably better because I'm lazier now. But I wish that I had understood the people part of the business a little better, and that I had prioritized, especially poignant as I'm dropping off the baby in 2 days, the baby being 18 at college. The time is fleeting, and we're not getting any of it back, and none of us are getting out of here alive, right? So all planes land, and it's just a matter of how gracefully, some more graceful than others. So I just wish that I could have thought about that a little more. I'm so fortunate that I met some really great people, and I don't know why. I'll never really know why. They invested in me, got nothing out of it, in most cases, other than a friendship. And I wish that I'd met them sooner and got the perspective, but not sure I was open to it at the time either. So I don't know.
That's a great feedback. Great lesson. What's a common myth about running an MSP or a tech business that you'd love to bust or debunk?
I think that I think the biggest myth is that you have to be a techno genius wizard person. I see, like, in cybersecurity, I say this all the time, and sometimes people get crazy wild-eyed about it, but I don't think technology is the solution. Technology is actually the problem. That's usually what they're trying to solve for, right? Is how to solve their technology problems. And in cybersecurity, people just throw tools at it, whatever, right? And I think there's this concept that a lot of the people, especially in the smaller MSPs, people get into it because they're good at it, technologically speaking, whatever. But to truly nurture the business in the way that it deserves and make it scalable and sustainable and all that, you have to really focus on the business. And I think there's some good influencers out there that preach that and put systems together around it. But I think this myth, and it even goes for the business side, but this myth that you have to know everything, be on top of everything, be in the weeds on certain things, I think that's the greatest myth. In fact, I think it's probably the siren song, right? You can just follow that song right up into the rocks a lot because you're not watching the business. You don't understand the fundamentals. And then conversely, for those who are not super technical and are better on the business side, something we talked about earlier is just know your limitations, have good advisors, and be willing to listen, and be okay with having to ask for help. I mean, there's a lot of really good people out there that, at least in my case, I know I can call if I want to pick their brain or just vent or whatever, and find yourself some of those. And if you don't have one, find me on LinkedIn, reach out, call me, whatever. I'm always happy to. I love talking about this stuff. I mean, it's awesome. Again, it's a chance to help somebody succeed or to turn, kind of like turnarounds of businesses. They're hard, but they can be really rewarding too for some of the same reasons. So I don't know, find those people.
I love that. What are you looking forward to right now? What's interesting to you, Mark?
Well, I'm really interested in a couple of things. Inside the business day to day, I'm really interested in how artificial intelligence and machine learning can change the way we're doing things in a constructive way, make people better. And somebody showed me something last week that blew my mind, and it's, I think they thought it was about the tech, but it was about how it can impact people, like in the business and not. It was about how you could customize learning. If I taught something everything there is to know about a topic, and then taught it to be able to interpret your responses and understand your weaknesses on the topic and where you need to be helped and how you need to be helped, and do it in a way that works for you on demand whenever you want it, like that could revolutionize the educational process, right? It could change the way we train people. It could change. And I think so many people are looking for ways to like replace people with AI. And God, I hope that never happens. I saw Mark Andreessen said like things are going to be ridiculously cheap and jobs are going to be a thing of the past. If I don't see that. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think you could make these huge impacts in how we make people better. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to also having a little bit of time to help figure out a better way to help small businesses in both just access to answers and coaching without, like, I don't want to say this the wrong way. I just think a lot of people out there that will offer you help. It's sort of like the sign at the airport that says if somebody's asking you if you need a ride, you think you shouldn't get in the car with them. Like there's all these wackos out there offering stuff, or there's the mass appeal of I can teach you my system, that Jordan, the new age Jordan Belfort's, right? But I think I'm trying to figure out a way. I think there's a way where you can help people reasonably and give them access to good quality advice and access to the experience that we pick up over 20 or 30 years of doing this. I mean, like 25 years, I've accidentally learned a lot of things. I may not be the brightest guy in the world. I've learned there's definitely no learning in the second kick of the mule, right? So I try to pick up after the first one. Second one just fucking hurts. So in fact, it hurts a lot worse because I should have known better, right? Yeah. And then I think the other thing that I'm looking forward to, and it goes hand in hand with that, is trying to figure out, is part of that helping is ways to find, really reform and help them find better access to capital, because the system is completely broken for small businesses, and most of the time people who are out there offering capital are not people that you want to take that capital from. So I think there's got to be a better way, and I'm really looking forward to trying to find a way to make that happen. I
love that. Those are things I can relate to directly, and in my
I think every entrepreneur can relate to that sometime or another, man. I mean, it's usually small amounts of money, and that's the problem, right? Like, people need a little bit of advice and $250,000, $500,000, and if you gave them those two things, they usually could go really far with it. Especially if you structure it in a way that protects them from themselves, right? But that's not out there easily. And an SBA loan and putting your house on the line, that takes some cojones, right? I mean, like, I lived most of my life with all my family's assets on the line, and that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, that's especially getting your wife to have to sign the documents. So it's like, you want to talk about shit getting real. So life comes at you fast when you say, I need you to sign these personal guarantees.
Yeah, that's the different kind of conversation entirely.
Yeah.
What's the one book you'd recommend?
I guess it depends on the context. There's a couple that I think have made a big difference for me over the years. In sales, there was a book called Managing Strategic Accounts that I thought was really, really good at walking through the process of how to deal with complex sales. It really informed my thinking on it. I don't even know who's got it. It's been passed around to so many of my friends at this point. Another book that I read that I thought was really great, and it was a really gesture of kindness that somebody did for me. Father Kevin Speece, who was a professor at Lewis University, where I went to college, he saw me show up. I showed up for the first day of class, and he noticed my boots. I was working midnights, and he noticed my police boots, and I was a little older than all the other kids in class. And he said, "What would you be doing if you weren't here?" I said, "I would be sleeping." And he said, "What do you mean sleeping?" I said, "I work midnights. I'd go sleep and go to court, and then go back to sleep and go to work." And he said, "Well, okay, I'm going to give you a book. You read Iacocca." And he made me read Iacocca and do a report for him on it. It was a fascinating book, actually. It was really, really interesting study in how he turned the company around. The whole government, people think of it as a government bailout, but it's really the government backing and the way he structured it. And it was interesting because he it was tough on everybody. It was tough for the union. It was tough for the equity. It was tough for everybody. And politically, not real, didn't make everybody happy. But so I think that was a great book about adversity. And then this book, Untethered Soul, I think is a good book about trying to understand yourself and the real you and everything that goes on inside. It's pretty. I just recently read that one. I think that's pretty cool. I think if you one's about skills, one's about just business in general, and I think always I'm looking for the next one about self-improvement.
I love that. I'll definitely add those to my reading list. You made the offer earlier, so if folks are listening and they do want to reach out, get connected with you for one reason or another, how do they find you, your business? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So they can always find me on LinkedIn, Mark Porter. And then our website is www.highwirenetworks.com. There's all sorts of links that go to a bazillion people. And if you write in, somebody will forward it to me or whatever. I get copied on a bunch of them. So, it's feedback or info or whatever. So I respond to a lot of them personally. People are kind of surprised, especially some of the investor ones. But I'm always happy to talk and try to help if I can. And even if it's just trying to figure out how to. I've had a lot of conversations with friends about when it's time to shut the business down. Right? Those are sad, but I've had two good friends that called me and asked if I knew when it was. I said, "You're asking the wrong guy," because I probably should have and didn't a couple of times and got through it. But if you're asking that question, it's good that we're talking, right? Because it was really hurting them. So I would genuinely be happy if anybody needs help. I'm happy to talk to them.
That's such a gift. If you're listening, that is a gift. At least I believe it is. Take advantage of Mark's generosity, and we'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. Mark, last thing, if you would, share what's the tattoo on your arm about the ending.
Yeah, it says, "This chapter only makes the ending sweeter." I don't know how to display on here. See if I can get that. There we go, a little bit. And that's what I told. That's what I told my son a lot, and I was probably saying it to myself as much as to him when he has two autoimmune diseases that came on about a year apart, and we thought the first one sucked. It's diabetes. He's a type 1 diabetic. We thought that was tough, and it is. I don't mean to downplay it, but about a year later, he got severe ulcerative colitis at a time when he was getting ready to report for camp for football for college, and lost 30 pounds, couldn't get out of bed, went to camp, had to come home for about a week, and he was unsure how to go on and how to get out of bed, and that was a tough time. So it was something that my personal Reverend Michael, who that's a whole other crazy story. I met him when I was eulogizing my mentor, and we stay in touch. And I don't go to not big on organized religion, but I go to church with him on the phone. He's out in California, so we talk at least once a month. And that guy knows every time, some way, somehow. The last time he called me, I was not dealing with stress well enough, and I found myself in the emergency room that thought I was having a heart attack, and he called me. I'm like, how in the hell do you know? I mean, it's just crazy. So I really believe that, and it's something to think about because we all go through those tough chapters in that book, man. And that's why I say I love a good story about redemption. I think, when you get to the other side, and you always get to the other side. It may not be exactly how you thought it was going to be, but it really makes the ending sweeter when you go through the tough chapters. And every great success story I know has tough chapters.
Yeah, without exception. This has been an amazing gift, Mark. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have been not sure if I should jump for joy or cry or just, be in the moment and present with how authentic and vulnerable you've shown up. So thank you for this gift that's, I believe, going to help people in the right time, in the right moment. Make sure to take Mark up on his generous offer. And I can't say thank you enough for giving me this time and for being on MSP Mindset.
Well, thank you. This is, to me, this is awesome to get the opportunity to, to share. I hope it helps. I really, it's where you just throw it out there. All you can do is throw it out there and hope that if it helps one person, then it's the best time we could ever spend.